Welcome to your next step up the self-publishing mountain.
I'm Matilda Swift, author of quintessentially British cozy mysteries.
And I'm Samantha Cummings, author of young adult books about magic, myths and monsters.
I've written the books,
Changed their covers,
tweaked their blurbs,
tried tools from a dozen ads courses.
and I'm still not seeing success.
Now, we're working together to plot and plan our way from barely making ends meet to pulling in a living wage.
Join us on our journey where we'll be mastering the pen to snag that paycheck. Hello and welcome to Pen to Paycheck Authors Podcast. I'm Matilda Swift here with my co-host Sam Cummings, and we're here to write our way to financial success. We're two indie authors with over a dozen books between us and still a long way to go towards the quit the day job dream. If that sounds familiar, listen along for our Mastery Through Missteps journey. Each week we cover a topic to help along the way. This week's topic is the reality of our mastermind meetings. Before that, let's do our wins and whinges of the week. Sam, what are yours?
I have a couple of wins this week. I have got one which is really your win, so I'll let you do your win. So I'll do mine, which is I had sent out some review copies of my book Curse of the Wild to some Instagram reviewers, and I've been getting messages saying that they have been received, and everyone's been very thankful and complimentary of like how they've been packed and what's been included. So I'm hoping that over the next week or two there'll be some posts on social media from different accounts, which is always the hardest part on socials. Like, you're constantly talking about your own book, and I'm forever just trying to get other people to talk about it. So that's like quite a big win if like posts start popping up from other people. That's like a big milestone for me. And my other win is that I had such an epic editing day today that I am this close to finishing this final edit of my book so that I can send it to like my editor and proofreader and stuff. So yeah, like it's been a good week and it's been a busy week, and yeah, it's been full on but very exciting. How about you?
It is very exciting. I have got a whinge, which, as you can hear, I'm a little bit ill. I don't know, a bit of a cough. So apologies if I cough during the podcast. I have got cough syrup and sweets to hand and a cup of tea, so hopefully that will stave it off. But part of that is also because we had lots of fun this weekend, a big win. It was my 100th birthday. I had a 100th birthday party, which if anyone's watching the video of this, you might be looking at this and thinking, you look very good for your age. So yeah, thank you. I am turning 40 this year. My stepmom turned 60 early this year, and neither one of us is particularly a big like birthday party person or even a big, milestone birthday person. But it seemed like a good opportunity to have something, a good celebration. And so we had a centenary party, and we celebrated a 1920s party going back 100 years, which coincidentally is currently the Paris Olympics. It was also the Paris Olympics 100 years ago. So it feels very apt. And everyone came and dressed up. Sam was there, and we had both on our hair very, very similarly. So if you're following the Instagram, you'll have seen us having very, very similar styled hair. Two of my other friends accidentally bought the same dress, but it looked fantastic. It looked really good. All the outfits looked fantastic. We had a speakeasy down in the basement that got raided by the police. We had card games down there. We had parlor games upstairs. My brother brought his pizza oven from the garden and made us pizzas, and him and his wife made cooked pizzas all evening. We had all sorts of drinks out in the garden as well, and it was a sunny day for the first time in forever. And we also played, it's my big win of the week, we played Snapdragon, which if anyone has read Halloween Party by Agatha Christie, hopefully it will have stayed with them. The kids play a game called Snapdragon. It has stayed in my mind, like seared into my mind since I first read that book. It was turned into the most recent Kenneth Branagh Agatha Christie horror story. So it was Death in Venice, I think. I don't think they played Snapdragon that because it was very loose adaptation. But in Snapdragon, it was like an old Victorian parlour game. In fact, apparently dates back to the 16th century, mentioned in some Shakespeare plays. But in it, you set fire with hot brandy to a bunch of raisins, and you have to reach in and pull them out. And that's the whole game. And everyone else thought, that sounds really weird, but that's not really a game. And then everyone was one round. Absolutely spectacularly. It was so much fun. So big win of the week. Wins in terms of writing and publishing. One that I think will come up later, we'll talk about relating to our mastermind, and one, we got an email from someone that listens to the podcast, which was very effusive and lovely and exactly what we wanted to hear, that we are helping other authors who are in a similar position to us. And that was just so nice. I really, over the past few years, have made a real effort to like reach out to people that I like, to compliment people in the streets. It is always really nice to say nice things to people, and it's lovely when someone says it back to you. So absolutely made my week. I think made both of our weeks to get that. So fantastic.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll be doing something with that author at some point soon.
Yes. Oh, it's lovely to hear feedback. I went to the party yesterday, and everybody who mentioned the podcast said such nice things. I was not really even thinking about having that conversation with people. And yeah, everyone said such nice things. And when I was being introduced around, and I was introduced to Sam, and then it was swiftly followed with a podcast Sam, and everyone was like, oh yeah, podcast Sam, which is my new way to introduce myself. And it's easy to forget that people are listening because we're just chatting. But yeah, when people are actually listening and people are enjoying it, and I think that's lovely, and I very much appreciate it. So that does lead us to today's topic, which is spilling the behind-the-scenes secrets of our mastermind meetings, in the hopes of helping other people set up something similar. So, what do people need to know in order to work with a mastermind partner of their own?
So it was interesting at the party yesterday because the missing third person in our mastermind, or sort of like in our group, was there. So Sam and I weirdly know each other, not from ever having really met or interacted until quite recently. But Sam went to primary school with someone who I went to high school with, and this person moved schools. And Sam went to a different school, and I had gone to a different primary school from them. So we never knew each other. We never crossed over. We must have met at some point when we were younger, but I've got no recollection of it. I've got a terrible memory. I'm so sorry. But also because we have this kind of mutual friend. Well, I'm very memorable, but because we have this mutual friend, obviously I've been hearing about Sam over the years, bits and pieces. So it sort of feels like, in some ways it feels like I've known her forever. And then I think just sort of by coincidence from maybe social media and reference, I realized, I found out she was self-publishing, and then was able to interact with her a bit more when I moved back to the UK. So this third person, the mutual friend of ours, was at the party last night. So it was so lovely. It felt like actually like a good full circle moment to have her there and to be able to chat with everyone together.
All the timelines kind of came together at one point, which was very nice. And very it felt right. It felt like it just felt like it was so natural, like it had always been, like we'd always been. It's a very strange feeling, but a very like nice, comforting feeling.
But that's maybe the thing to preface this conversation with, is that we do have in some ways a very long history together, but in some ways obviously not at all any history together. And I think that is when I was trying to think about how to form a group like this, I think it's very helpful to have someone that you have at least a significant amount in common with in some way. Because I think the best thing for us, the thing that's worked really well, is being able to be incredibly open and honest. That has felt like a real thing that was missing from my self-publishing before. A lot of people in this business, it's incredibly hard to tell how well they're doing. Nobody wants to say, I'm not making money off my books, or I'm just getting by. There's no openness, there's no transparency about, not none, but there's very minimal transparency about money until you are successful. So it's really hard to get a sense of, am I the only person that's not doing well at this, or is everyone not doing that well? You've got no sense of it. And people tell success stories about their ads, and they might say, oh, I failed at Amazon ads, but now my Facebook ads are making me £1 million a minute. And you're like, oh, I still haven't figured that out. So I think the big benefit was having someone that I felt like I could be really incredibly transparent with. And what helped was knowing that we have enough of a common background that it I don't know why it felt comfortable, because obviously I didn't know you, but I sort of know enough about you to know that you're a trustworthy person. And that's going to be quite tricky to
Yes, I
replicate
think
in other
that's
ways for other people.
yeah. I think that's it. It seems like our meeting, our coming together, feels like almost as if nobody else could replicate it. But maybe it's just because we both went into it with that open mind. Like we knew of each other. We have the same friend, so trust that friend to have good friends, which is nice. But when we both met up, like we chatted on Zoom a fair few times before we met up face to face. And Zoom is like, it's different on Zoom. I don't think that I would say doing it online only is bad, but I do think that our face-to-face meetings, in particular our first face-to-face meeting, was the door opener. That was like the time where I thought, oh wow, like this is it. This is the person who I'm going to really enjoy working with, and who, like, every single thing that I was saying, you were saying the same thing, to even the point where we both admitted in that first meeting that we had that we wanted to do a podcast, and then we were just like, well, I guess we're doing a podcast then.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So, like,
I think actually that's
like,
interesting that you mentioned our previous
face-to-face.
Zooms, because I think actually that was helpful. I hadn't necessarily thought about that as being key, but it's not like we leapt straight into being like, here's my bank account, look at all my financial details. We
No,
originally had, during
no,
the
not at
pandemic,
all.
had Zooms that were monthly-ish, and we swapped writing, so we kind of had critique partners, and through that, you get a sense of what someone's like. It's like, if you don't trust someone's critique, there's no point going any further, really. There's no point being mastermind partners. Like, not that they have to be in your genre, not that they have to be the world's best editor, but if you're not really vibing with their critique, it's going to be really hard to work with them on a deeper level. And like, we don't write in the same genre at all, like incredibly far apart.
No.
But we both have a similar interest in learning about things. We were both very like engaged in the critique process. We were both kind of responsible critique partners. So like, submitted things when we said we would, critique the other person's work. I think had you shown up to those groups and always been like, oh, I haven't read new ones this month, I'll quickly read them now in 5 minutes, or had you not submitted for it consistently, I'd be like, I wouldn't want to take it any further. So I would say start with something small. Don't jump into, let's meet weekly face to face and talk about all of our deepest fears. So something preliminary is great.
It was almost like that critique group was kind of like dating. Like we were kind of going on a few little dates to feel it out, not realizing that it was going to lead to this, because it wasn't our intention. The critique group wasn't intended to be anything other than a critique group, and it was a fun way to get to know like your writing style and your critiquing style, because that's a big thing, is figuring out how like brutal somebody can be, or not brutal in a bad way, but I just mean how honest somebody's going to be with you, and also finding out whether you like compatible. Yeah, that's a good word. But and also how much you appreciate the other person's writing, because I think if your writing was something that I read and I wasn't interested in, this wouldn't work. But because when I read your stuff, and I can see how talented you are, just to big up your ego, it makes me want to be involved in helping your career. Like I want you to progress. I want you to win, because I think that you are good enough to win. And I think that helps. I think meeting somebody who you actually want to see do well, and it's not just for yourself, is a very
I mean, that feels like a big
incentive
to me. Is like, it is, and I think most people would agree with this. At least people in self-publishing, is like, it's much easier to help someone else than to help yourself. And that's not necessarily true for everybody, but that I think is something that you hear a lot from people, you know, in this sort of industry. You see it a lot in sort of Facebook groups about people saying, you know, everyone's often getting sidelined by spending time helping other people, and it's easy to focus on that. Why not put the energy also into yourself and like give yourself that commitment? But I think it is really hard to do, and it's really hard to do in a vacuum. So it does feel easier to help someone else. But when you're working closely as a pair, helping someone else naturally will help yourself. Like thinking about,
Yes.
okay, let's look at your books and how we could, do they align with the market? And like, let's do the work together. That I think is going to naturally help yourself.
Yeah, because the conversations that you have with somebody else often get very introspective, and you realize that you're giving yourself that that information as well. It's like very much giving somebody a little bit of like a confidence boost, or sharing some knowledge that you didn't realize that you had, and it makes you realize how much knowledge you might have about something that you told yourself you weren't knowledgeable about at all. Because directing it elsewhere feels more comfortable than directing it at yourself, which is, I think, another good lesson, or another positive of doing mastermind, is that you start to look at yourself with, I think, maybe a little bit kinder eyes. It feels less selfish. If you're just working on your own, you feel almost a little bit silly trying to convince yourself that what you're doing is going to work. You feel like it's more of a dream if you're just doing it on your own. That might not be for everyone, but definitely for me, working on my own felt like I was just working on my own, and all the doors were closed because I'd closed them all, so that I was just like at my laptop by myself. As soon as you open that door to somebody else, the world gets bigger, and you start to see like, oh, if I believe that this person can make it, I can make it as well. So I
The
think
closed door metaphor,
quite a nice
that's
positive.
really helpful to think about. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think definitely my mindset is often, because there's so many things in self-publishing, it's like you're walking down a really long corridor and you're like, oh, I know that Amazon ads door is out. I'll come back to that door later, but I just need to go down this door right now. I need to go down the find new covers door. I need to go through that. And it's like you can only go through one door at once, and you literally have to ignore the other doors. And it feels bad. Like when you picture like in like a nightmare where a long corridor illuminates ahead of you, and like flick, 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 flick all the lights, and they illuminate just 1,000 doors ahead of you. It feels like that when you're by yourself, and you can sort of think, I cannot think about the rest of the doors. I have to think about the rest of them. I have to think about this one. But you can feel the weight of the rest of them. But actually talking to somebody else about this stuff makes you realize, like, they're not all doors. And they're not all doors I want to open. And they're doors that we could like peek through together and then consider and evaluate. It's like the difference between being in a horror movie as like the only character and being in a horror movie as two people. And you're like, actually, it's not that scary.
Yeah.
We were just kind of, I was, petrified by myself because I was listening to all the scary noises and worried about the flickering lights. And when there's another person there, you can be like, oh, actually, it's just a corridor. Like we can walk down this together.
Yes.
So it does take a bit
I
of
like the idea of,
for me, I get a lot of anxiety from the things I'm not looking at.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. Like walking down a corridor and like peeking through some of them and opening the others, but thinking to yourself you can only open one door at a time. And when you're with somebody else, I like to think of some doors have two sets of keys and you both have to turn them at the same time. And that's what you get with a partner, is you get to have the other person who's like, you've got the other key as well, we can do this one together. Like doors that would never open if you were just on your own. So I think that kind of is leading me to my one of the notes that I've just made whilst we were talking, which is one of the bigger benefits of doing a mastermind, which is accountability. And this ties in with the doors, because sometimes you think, oh, I'll go back to that door, but when you're on your own, it's easy to forget. But when you've got a partner to talk to about it, oh yeah, or just completely ignore it. I think if there is one thing that has been so beneficial for me, it's having you hold me accountable. And I know you said this before as well. Like when we are getting together for our meetings and when we are coming to do the podcast, and we've set ourselves topics to talk about during the next week, or like set ourselves tasks to do during the week, I know that I have to do it, because if I don't, I'm going to look like an a-hole. And like I don't want to show up empty-handed. And so it is really, really helpful to have that accountability to like to work with you instead of like just being a lazy bum.
Yeah, because I think your idea is correct. Like some doors do have two keys. Because I think
Mm.
we see things in sort of like we're often looking at the same thing, so we're very good at focusing on the same thing but from different perspectives, and we bring two halves of something to a conversation. So I think that's why this podcast works very well. It's like often we think along the same track but in really different ways, so we can have the conversation
Yeah.
and illuminate different parts of what we're talking about. It's the same thing when we're talking about kind of anything off air as well, that we will be able to bring very different perspectives on something that actually it could have taken me a month to think of something that you thought of in a day, and vice versa. And it just
Yeah.
speeds things up, not
Yeah.
having to do every single job yourself. And one of the jobs is just thinking,
Yeah.
like thinking and planning and having
Yeah.
a concept of a business
Yeah.
that is actually really hard to do by yourself.
It is. Oh, running a business by yourself is just so, oh my God, like I never ever want to do that again. It's,
Yeah.
two brains are better than one.
Yeah. And a lot of things are just, it's helpful to have someone else to talk to. So just before we came on, so one of the things that
Yeah.
we want to talk about today is things we do off air, because we try and keep a podcast under an hour a week because we know people don't necessarily want to listen to us forever. Some people would love to, but it's not for everyone. So we want to make
Yeah.
sure that it's around an hour at most a week. But before we come on, we have a chat, and we have a chat about things in our lives and just day-to-day stuff. We can have a bit of a gripe. I complained quite a lot about having a cough this week, which you don't need 10 minutes on that. That's not, super fun. But we get to that off air. But we also talk about other things that are not necessarily related to the today's topic, but are still writing related. So one thing we did before this was I need a new name for a character. And it's in a book that I've been writing off and on for months and months. So I'm sort of felt very, the idea of the name felt very immovable to me. I was like, I cannot think of, like, that's the character's name in my head. So I was really struggling to think about it, but had a very good reason for changing it. And I've spoken to a few other friends in the last week or so, like, have you got any ideas for this? These are the criteria I want to have. This is the sound it wants to have. And we've talked around it, and the other friends really couldn't do anything. And then Sam and I spoke for literally 10 minutes, and then we did it, like, fixed the new name. It met all the criteria. We had the right backstory for it. Done. And that I could have just spent months and months thinking about and getting nowhere with. And
Yeah.
it's quite hard. Like other writing friends, I have got loads of other writing friends, but I just don't ever, I don't get into the nitty-gritty with them. Everyone's at different stages with things, I think, unless you're having very,
Yeah.
very regular conversations about writing and publishing. It's really hard to open that conversation. Whereas it feels like with us, our conversation is always open. We have a separate WhatsApp group
Oh,
separate to
yes.
our individual people. Like we have one just for this group where we are always sharing podcasts. We might bring a query, we might screenshot, like I screenshotted some positive comments we got somewhere else from a friend, all sorts of things. We're constantly talking about stuff, and even just like sharing our wins, that feels really nice. And they're off really, really tiny wins that there's no one else I can share those with because no one else gets it. And it just keeping that conversation open makes me feel like 1,000% less alone.
Yes. Yeah, and that is another point to the mastermind thing, is finding somebody who is maybe that you don't have to be exactly in the same place. Like we have got different number of books out. We've been doing it for a different length of time, but we are within the same bracket of our career that just needs to move on. So it just works out that we're both ready to step up. And if either one of us was at even a slightly different stage, it wouldn't work as well. But we're both like it just happened naturally that we were both at this stage at the right time. The universe is really rooting for us.
I know. That's an interesting question, though. I was like thinking about that. We're at pretty similar stages. How do you think this would change? So, say in a year's time, you have just written a series that absolutely catapults you to millionaire author status. Like, how do you think our conversations would change and the things we think about?
Oh, I wouldn't be here. No, I'm joking. I don't think the conversation would. Don't think the conversation would change too much. I think that because that if that were to happen, it would be like a one in a. I mean, I don't want to say like a 1 in a million chance, because that's what we all want and expect, is to just hit a series right or a book right that does catapult you into that next, like into the major leagues. But you still, the day to day is still the same. You still got to write the next book. You still got to market the book, and you still got to try and keep the money. If you get to that stage, you then got to try and keep that money rolling in, because anything less is then a negative. So I think that the struggle would still be the same. Not struggle in a bad way, but the job, the business would still be the same. I'd still be running the business the same. I think really the only way that either one of us would outpace the other one is if I stopped publishing books and I never I never climbed up, or like I never worked on my backlist, or I never built the business, and you continue to publish books, and the amount of books made a bigger difference. So, because everyone knows that the more books you have out, the more money in general you should be making. And yeah, if I didn't publish any more books for a couple of years, I wouldn't progress enough for this to be like worthy of either of our times. Because
I do think actually though there's another situation. Yeah, I think, because I think the person who has like sudden overnight success, you really do have the same struggles that we have right now, because you don't necessarily know what you've done. You're still sort of chasing your tail in some ways. You're thinking like, oh gosh, I might get my newsletter done, get some ads done. You're still figuring a lot of stuff out. Whereas actually I've spoken to other authors who are, at really different levels, like 6-7-figure authors. And I think there's something about their understanding of the business that just makes them seem a lot calmer about those aspects. They have very different worries. They're maybe looking at more like the business as a whole, as in the business of self-publishing as an industry. They're maybe working at industry level, and I think their concerns are out of the scale of what we are currently thinking about. So I think if over a matter of several years one of us pulled away at really different rates together, I think that would be really hard to keep having conversations, because we'd be talking about very different things. But at the same time, it's very hard to envision that happening, because what would one of us learn that the other one wouldn't learn? So I think it feels like, a rising tide lifts all boats. I think everything that we would learn together, I would expect us to be able to grow at the same pace.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, is that if you suddenly mastered Facebook ads or Amazon ads, you would tell me how to do it, and vice versa. Yeah, I'd tell you. I wouldn't be like, well, it sucks to be you, still trying to do that whilst I'm up here like selling all these books. Like we wouldn't leave the other one behind, and just start making money and like go off. This is a business partnership. Our businesses are effectively tied to one another. There's no benefit for trying to outpace or outrun each other, because I don't want to do this alone. And and I think that our growing together is the most natural thing that could happen.
Yeah, I think that is really key. Like, I don't want to be growing at a different pace to you. I think there's no issue if one of us is necessarily any more money than another. If you became an overnight success, and we're literally earning £1 million a minute, I think we would still be able to work together, and we would pull each other up. Because we have the same concerns. So I think that is really useful to think about. And if you had presumably this millionaire overnight success, you'd be like, oh, let's invest some money in both our ads. I think that's what I would do as well. I think I would, if I had lots of money coming in, I would very happily invest it in like both of us growing at the same pace, because it feels like this is a business where it has felt so unproductive to work on my own, that this feels like a partnership. Like, it feels like we're not working anymore on our individual businesses, that we are like two heads better than one on it. And that, I think, is something that I would really hope that other people find. Have you got anything else to say on that? Because my other topic is kind of like, how can people find that, where to look for that? Where would you look for it if you didn't have it?
I don't have anything to say on that. My next thing was going to be talking about the actual face-to-face meetings we have, but let's do your thing first, and then we'll do my thing.
Yeah. So I think before we had started this, I wasn't looking for this. And that's maybe, I think your earlier comparison to dating is quite apt in that people are always like, oh, it finds you when you're least expecting it. I wasn't looking for a mastermind partner. And then we had those those Zoom chats that didn't feel like that's what we were working towards. But obviously we were building a relationship. And then something you posted online was exactly the same as something I had just said to various friends about wanting to move full time in a certain time frame.
Yes, I just had a flashback to
the
that.
universe. Yeah. And then I was just like,
I forgot that I'd instigated it.
Yeah. And I felt so empowered because of our previous connection, and just because I felt so driven at the time by this decision, that I just reached out to you and I was just like, let's meet up and let's have these face-to-face meetings. And originally that's all we did. We just said let's have a face-to-face meeting. Did we have a Zoom chat originally, or did we go straight to face-to-face?
I think we just went face-to-face. Yeah, because when we met up, I remember thinking I didn't quite know, I didn't know what we were going to talk about. We'd had given ourselves some stuff to bring to the table, in terms of what we were looking to, what we wanted our careers to look like. But and I'm sure we'd set some sort of tasks, which we'll get into later. I'm sure we had set ourselves some sort of tasks. If I found one of my old notebooks, I definitely would have written it down. But no, it was
we definitely in the first meeting
met up.
Just said, I think the idea was definitely let's meet monthly to have a chat, maybe.
Yes,
that's what I sort of remember us talking about. Because I had just finished a mindset book that was kind of about, ways to, what was it about? Like looking at other models of other people that you thought, how do they work, and then get that in place, and then about making connections. And I was like, let's meet up monthly and kind of have a chat about things without really an expectation of what that would look like, which was very bold of me. I'm sure I knew what it was going to be about. But we both brought our laptops. We both had all of our regular self-publishing tabs open and just went through them all. Here's how much money I make. Here's what I've done. Here's where here's how I don't understand how Facebook ads work. Here's the back end of that. And we looked at the back end of each of everything that we have open on our tabs on our computers, which I think is easily 10 tabs on every self-published author's computer. And we talked a bit about genres and what we don't understand. Yeah. And that felt almost unburdening, even though I don't think we really shared anything that was secret. It just, I didn't have anyone else to talk about it with in an open way.
No, I've never ever, but this has always been a problem. I tend to just go off and do my own things, and my family would attest to that. It's on holidays I just used to disappear with a book, and they'd be like, well, I guess she's gone. Just leave me with a book. But yeah, I had never ever spoken to anybody about writing ever, apart from our critiquing group. I honestly don't think I've ever had a conversation with somebody about what I was writing, what my process was. And I did NaNoWriMo and stuff, so I talked about it in passing to people, but none of those NaNoWriMo relationships were anything other than just cheering each other on. It wasn't shop talk. So yeah, it was it was scary. And I remember going back on the train and being just a bundle of anxiety, because it was just the most heart-wrenching thing to do, is to talk about something that you feel you shouldn't be talking about. I don't know why.
Yeah. A lot of it is, it's about money. A lot of the conversation is about money, which is not something particularly English people talk about. But I remember in that conversation, we shared our salaries, we shared how much money we make, in every aspect of our lives and how much we spend. It felt very, and it didn't feel like we were sharing secrets. It felt like we were just talking. It didn't feel difficult to talk about. Yeah, and I do think part of that was having a sense of knowing you beforehand, at least from those critique meetings, having that sense of some sort of history together.
Yeah. So, what do you think is helpful for other people? How do you think other people should find these people Like,
Mm-hmm.
should they be people that they know, or do you think this relationship could work if we hadn't had like any kind of background, or if we didn't meet face to face? Do you think that this would still? Do you think other people could find or mimic this in some way? Obviously, it wouldn't be as fun or as funny.
Yeah, wouldn't be as good as ours. Yeah, far fewer Goonies reference, I think. Well,
Yeah.
yes, I think just literally because I had no concept of this being possible, I hadn't ever been looking for it. But kind of reflecting back on this, I think I could have initiated it with other people. I think I could still initiate it with people. I think if you died, I would move on, right? And it's like, that's tragic to say. I'm not going to be dressed in black forever. I wouldn't be a sad widow for the rest of my life. I would move on. I would find someone else.
That's
but you can't.
I mean,
I would not
as
like
a
you
ghost,
to move
I'd have other things to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, I'd obviously carry a picture of you around with me everywhere, but no one would compare.
A little locket. Yeah. So but I do think now I know it's a thing. Now you've opened my eyes to the world of like a mastermind partner. I think I could find somebody else. And the people that I have been thinking about, not cheating on you, sorry, but I was trying to think about this intentionally of like, who would I approach? No, who would I have that like connection to? I think it is other people who, I think it's vibes. Like genuinely, I think it's vibes. Because I think what I'm looking for is people who have the same outlook as me. I don't want someone who is like sunshine and rainbows and like, it's all just going to work out. The world is wonderful and we can just be like little cheerleaders together and be super excited. And I don't want someone who's like a real downer who just complains and is on like every writing Facebook group grousing about Amazon and how they're stealing all our money. I wouldn't really want either end of the spectrum. I also want someone who think maybe we could do our Clifton strengths together. I think that's important, is like someone who's got similar strengths to you. So I think we're both very focused on learning new things and enjoy learning new things.
I still need to do my Clifton strengths.
Yeah.
I haven't, no.
Interesting though, I don't think we would have that similar strengths, but I think we have some things in common. Yeah, because I think we both like similar things.
I don't think we'll have any of this. Well, like we'll have some
overlap,
like crossover-y, like you say, like inquisitiveness or whatever the Clifton strengths are. I'm sure that we'll have some like important ones that go together, and then the other ones will be complementary.
Yeah. Because I think that is important, is not having someone who is 100% similar to you. I would also say I would have struggled had we been friends beforehand. And that's not necessarily true for everyone, but I think that's true for me and my friendships. I think in my friendships, I wouldn't necessarily want to be confusing like business in that. I think it helps that we're not friends first, that we can kind of we have like, it's like I feel like you're my work wife. Like we have a very close relationship. Like you came to my birthday party. I think we are friends now, but we are not friends first, and that really keeps it feeling productive even when we chat for hours. It feels like we are doing work.
Yeah, exactly.
But we are loving our work.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I agree. I think that I think it's maybe just I'm very like introspective about this sort of thing, where I'm very aware of the fact that I have different personalities for different friends. And if we had been friends, like you say, before we started this, it would have been very difficult for me to have broken whatever like mask I wore. I'm sorry to any friends listening, but I am a different friend for everybody. I feel that's just a human thing, but I also do think that people say that, like that's just like normal. But as a Gemini, I do feel like that's like a Gemini thing, like just putting on different masks for people. But I feel like if we'd have been friends beforehand, changing my personality to one that was like talking about work would have felt very strange. Like it would have been such a weird shift. And like you say, like we're not encumbered by any like previous interactions, or we don't have a history where past things may come up and cloud what we're really here to
Yeah,
do,
like
which
you're
is
always
just
like that.
focus
You
on
always
like,
doubt me.
yeah, yeah, like we are so both enthusiastic about writing and like love it so much and love the idea of like this being a business that can create the lives that we want. I think that's like a really nice thing to build not just this like mastermind on, but it's also a really nice place to start the friendship.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is I don't feel I have, and I've sort of touched on this, but I think it's important to stress, like, I don't feel like I have any self-consciousness around you. And I think part of that does come from not having had a previous friendship. Because I think with friends,
Yeah.
you do build up, not necessarily resentments, but like you build up an awareness of what they think of you. And you're always maybe trying to live up to that sometimes,
Yeah.
and maybe you're holding like a little bit of a thorn in your side about like, oh, I'm sure they think I'm not as successful as they are. And that's maybe not what you're always thinking, but like that's a little like resentment in the night that you might niggle about. And I don't want that to confuse what we talk about ever. And I think that's maybe partly where
Yeah.
like the difference in our personality works very well. I think that we maybe are different enough that there's not enough overlap, but like the areas that I'm self-conscious about with other friends, I don't think are things that you care about, and I think maybe vice versa. So I think that has been very
Yeah.
helpful. So that's where I think like vibes are important. It sounds silly, but I think it is really helpful to find someone that you just find it quite easy to have a chat with. That, because at least for us, that's really important. So where to find that
Yeah.
sort of person? I would say it needs to be someone that you have definitely talked to. I would say I would not find someone in like a Facebook group. I find it very hard to
No.
evaluate people in that. I think there's no sense of what someone's really like. So places where I have been thinking about like, oh, if Sam died tragically, I'd find her replacement here, was in the
It will be
in the
tragic.
Clubhouse group that I go to every Monday. In that group, we have so Clubhouse is like a conference call sort of, where everyone dials in. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can speak, and you can just sit silently. In that group, there's some people who they talk often, and when I hear what they have to say, I think, oh yeah, I'd love to chat a bit more with them after this about that. But I don't necessarily know them well enough to think, oh, I could do that. And before we started our mastermind, I wouldn't have necessarily known what the objective was. But now, when I've got over my period of mourning, I might approach somebody in there about it. So I think where you have some sort of personal, quite open conversation, because the conference call is closed. You have to you have to join the group and come along. People don't normally speak unless they've been to a few meetings. So there's a sense of trust already. And then the other place I would have found someone is in the SPS live conference that I've been to 3 years in a row. From that,
Yeah.
I've done things like I joined the Clubhouse from that. In fact, I've got another like chat on Facebook Messenger with a couple of other authors. I'm going to a retreat with some in September. I've been in an anthology with others. I think that networking has built quite a sense of trust, and I could from that take forwards a mastermind that wouldn't be as good as this one. It would be different. I wouldn't love them as much as I love you, but I would move on with my life and enjoy it. And it's
Yes.
interesting that we didn't meet in either of those places, but we met in somewhere where we had a conversation to connect.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. Because I haven't been to SPF Live, and I'm really looking forward to going next year for like the event to learn and stuff, but also for the connections, like to meet people who are doing it. So I know of like 2 or 3 local authors who live in my town, around my town, like 20 minutes away and stuff. So I do really want to reach out to them. To be fair, like this is like just the writer's life, is that you say, oh, we should grab coffee and talk about writing, and then like you don't. So I've got 2 people where we've said this and we haven't done it, and I've written myself a note that I need to get in touch with them, because I do think local authors in particular, I think if somebody lives in your area, you probably have something in common with them, like lifestyle wise. You're probably like making around the same amount of money because you live in the same place. And generally just have some stuff to talk about, because you probably know people in common. That's what I always find whenever I meet anybody. It's like everybody knows everybody.
I think similar
so
lifestyles
I know,
is
like, if I
important, because I
wanted
think
yeah,
I was gonna say I think it's significant that like we don't have kids, either of us. I have other writers friends who do have kids, and I find it sometimes the conversation there's a limit to how much we can really empathize each other's problems. Like, I'm aware that they have a problem trying to schedule things around having kids, but like, I think I don't understand it on a deep level enough to really make a mastermind
Yes.
conversation about that helpful.
Yes. Yeah, I think if I wanted to start something with somebody else, I'm sorry, still carrying the locket, but in your version, I have both been a millionaire and I've died, so at least I'm
Is it a
carrying
perfect
you
week
around
for
with
you?
me. Yeah, I think I would know now what I'm looking for and how to nurture that relationship, which is nice to know. I mean, I'm not looking to doing this with more people, because this is like this is a full-time, like writing is a full-time job, but mastermind is a full-time job because it's part of the job. But yeah, like I definitely would reach out to local people and just feel out the vibes, see if these people that I know who write are like worthy of being in my presence.
Yeah. That I think is an important point, though. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of time work. So I would have said before we started meeting up, I'm a very busy person. In fact, I would say that's a common theme amongst my friends, that I am notably always talked about as a busy person. I think of myself as an averagely busy person, but I think that is not true. But I would have said I don't have
No, you're
time for
insane.
more
You're
things
an
in my life.
insane person.
But I
Yeah.
would have said I don't have time for more things in my life before we started meeting. And we now meet for probably about 2 hours a week over into the internet. Following this, I spend another hour a week editing our podcast. And also once a month we meet up face to face for what is essentially a full day. So including travel, it is a full work day.
Yes.
I didn't really have time to be adding, 15 hours, maybe 15 to 20 hours a month of something into my month. But it doesn't feel like work, and it feels so worthwhile that I'm so glad to make time for it. But also it replaces time I probably wasted before, because it doesn't feel draining. It feels energizing. So like Sunday evenings, I was never going to be productive with them. I'm tired on a Sunday evening. I'm probably just watching TV, or maybe reading a book, or like sitting with a book but really watching TV. Whereas this doesn't feel tiring just to chat to you. And so I get to do it and make great use of this time period that is late on a Sunday evening.
Yeah, it's very enriching. The conversations we have are moving us forwards. And like you say, like if I wasn't doing this, I'd maybe spend more time on Sunday writing or editing. And particularly on the days where we have mastermind, which is a whole day. Like I leave the house at 10 to 11. So I've had like a morning to like have breakfast and stuff, but then I leave the house at 10 to 11. I get back home at about 6:30-ish, have dinner, and then we jump straight into doing a podcast. So like that's a lot of time, but I could be doing other stuff, but I feel like it's so beneficial. Like it's something that I like. It's stuff that I wouldn't do. It's things that I wouldn't talk about. It would be things that I'd be brushing under the carpet, talking about money and Facebook ads and planning how to launch a book or how to change a cover or what the best podcasts are to listen to or books to read. Like I wouldn't be doing that. There's no way. I would never hold myself accountable to that. I'd just still be churning away.
The podcast is a really big help to that. So that's my top tip for everyone who wants out a mastermind is like make a podcast. And I'm sort of not joking about that, because that I think is one thing that helps us kind of keep, because I think we got on really well. I think we could end up being friends rather than like colleagues first. And I think we could end up these chats evolving into, either we just chat or we don't commit to the Sunday evenings, because Sunday evenings is actually a terribly inconvenient time to have consistently free every week. and often we maybe once every 6 podcasts we move it to a Monday because we couldn't make the Sunday, but that is rare. I will plan my week around this time being busy. But if this were just like we were chatting, we would miss them, right? We would miss weeks where it's like, oh, I'm not feeling very well this week, or I'm a bit busy, or I'm a bit tired. Can we skip this week? It would be incredibly easy to do. And I wouldn't want to hold you to it if you said, I'm not feeling great this week. I'd be like, yeah, of course. Let's chat next week. And then you get to the stage where you just don't. Actually, making a podcast keeps you incredibly accountable, keeps you on a single topic, really makes you look at the topic in a way that you don't do when you're by yourself. And I genuinely think people should make a podcast. It's not actually, I think it seems like a big barrier to
I would
entry
love
to
that.
make one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I recommend it to people all the time. It's not that expensive, so it helps definitely because there's two of us, we can split the costs. It's a couple $100 a year, which is not nothing, but is if you're paying that for a course, you would pay that for a course, for like a year-long course that taught you everything you need to know about publishing and made you do it. We both happen to already have these microphones in that we need for podcasting, but I think they were not expensive either. Affordable.
They're not expensive.
I've had mine for years and years. No, I've had mine for maybe 5 years, and it's absolutely fine. And that is literally all you need.
Yeah.
So say you have to buy one piece of equipment, it's a couple £100 a year, and that keeps you, helps you level up in a way that I think nothing else can. Why isn't everyone doing this?
I would
genuinely, if anybody wants to start a podcast and wants to ask us for help, get in touch.
Yes, I would love it if we sprouted like this new mastermind podcast. It could be a genre of podcasts. We could have kickstarted an actual genre of authors or anybody, any kind of creative outlet. I think this works for anything where people are trying to move forwards and trying to do something as a business, and it's difficult doing it on your own. I think that these what we talk about is not just for writers. I think it's for anybody who is creative, who's trying to figure out how to make this the day job and live the dream. And I would love if people start making podcasts, and I would love to listen to them. I would love to listen to what other people are doing.
I've had a couple people mention to me recently that it is very refreshing to have podcasts made by people who are not yet successful, because it is a really different thing to listen to podcasts from people who are looking back and saying, I am making a full-time income from this, and here's how I did it. You're looking through rose-tinted glasses, and you cannot help that. I think we would do the same if we got there and made the podcast starting then. You'd only really focus on small things that stood out to you, whereas we are charting the whole process. And it is interesting. It's interesting when we go back to a podcast, we had to record one on finances, and I had to go back to our first episode on finances to re-listen to it. It was so helpful to see actually a lot of those things I made no progress on between those two podcasts that were almost 6 months apart, and then reflect on why I didn't. Whereas if I hadn't listened to that podcast, I would have thought I'd made more progress than I really had. I would have looked back with a kinder eye on myself, but actually being forced to see the process of the things I have put off is really helpful. And I think we're missing that from the industry. We're missing that, capturing that, the journey. And even if I think this takes us 5 years, right, that wouldn't matter. I think that would be such a helpful thing to listen to. 5 years of people making slow, incremental, steady progress. I think it will take less, and I'm hoping it will take less, but I think it will be a worthwhile podcast either way.
Yes, I agree. So before we wrap this up, I just wanted to quickly talk about the realities of because we talk about what we talk about. We've talked about what we talk about when we're doing our Zoom, our calls before we start recording. I call it Zoom. That's just such a generic term now. So we have chats and stuff before we press record, and we are messaging each other through the week. But those face-to-face meetings where we spend the whole day, we meet at 12:30 and we leave at whatever time we get kicked out of where we meet up, which is 4:30, 5, and they literally kick us out every month. We're the last ones there.
They follow us out. They're sweeping us out with a broom.
They do. They're they all wait at the front door, and it's watching us leave. I always feel really guilty, but also kind of like a naughty school kid. I got away with it again. But those meetings, we talk about. We kind of use that time to do big picture thinking, blue sky thinking, as the corporates would call it, where we try and plan the future podcasts. So we come up with all the different genres, topics that we want to talk about. Genres is the wrong word, but we come up with the topic and the theme that we want to talk about, and we plan them all out. We also kind of
when we say come up
back
with,
and see
in
what
fact,
we
what
can
that
do
really
a
is
bit better.
analyze where you're at in your business. Sorry, I just overlapped. We say come up with what we actually do is like think about what am I really thinking about right now? Like what's my big area of concern? And can we is that something that overlaps with you? And like how does that overlap with you? And how can we make 4 episodes around it? Like I think it's quite helpful to have a 4-episode series that makes us really think through an issue. I would say it's interesting that like often the very last thing we do is that we have for the last 2 times had to sit outside on a bench and actually plan out the podcast, because everything we're doing is towards the end of like towards the aim of making the podcast in theory, but really it's about our publishing.
Yes, so we often talk about just trying to think what we actually talk about now, because we sit down for hours, but we talk about
everything.
It's like it's kind of difficult to put it into words, but we always come together with something that's been bothering us about like the last week or the last month, where it's just something that we can't quite get a grip of. So it could be something like, I've been trying to do Facebook ads and like I'm not getting anywhere. What are some, like, can we look at other people's Facebook ads or adverts and stuff to see what they're doing? Or
we look at each other's back ends. That's really helpful.
Yes,
back ends on Facebook, looking at not back ends.
Yes. Yes, look at each other's butts. But look, we look at each other's, or at our own and at each other's Amazon pages, our book pages, to see like and ask each other like, is my synopsis like, is it reading is it exciting? Is it to read? Is it something that you would press like an immediate buy on? We know all those things where it's just easier to look at with somebody else. And we often kind of just spend our time huddled around a laptop trying to like figure out things like genres and how we can really drill down on our niches. And it's just so much easier to do that with somebody else, like looking at a computer with somebody else, or both of you like doing separate things, separate screens, and having that conversation face to face, where I don't know, you just really benefit from working with somebody in real time. It's just different.
Yeah, and it's often things that I do. The most useful thing is stuff that you really hate doing by yourself. So we have done a good couple of hours on looking at blurbs, and we talked about blurbs that we liked. We looked at examples and talked about where they worked and didn't work. We followed a model of someone's blurb to make our own. So like, how does that work? How does it not work? And we could criticize each other and say, you didn't follow this pattern here. This is why it's not sounding engaging enough. And it's all things that you could tell yourself, but you won't, because it's a sort of thing where it gets uncomfortable and so difficult. You're like, I can't do this. I'll just put it. I'll do it another day. But if you're sat there with someone else, you're forced to do it. So we spent a good amount of time brainstorming blurbs, going that process. We quite often, when we come together, we've got a specific author or genre or like subcategory query of like, I feel like I keep saying this around, I don't quite understand it. Like, how is this author successful, or what genre are they writing in, or their covers don't seem to match the genre but they're really popular. Like, can we figure out together what this is about? And we will through the process we'll talk about all sorts of things, but that kind of is our central question of the day, and it takes us on a big journey and helps us understand things a lot deeper. And again, I think it's worth reiterating, like, we don't write in the same genre at all, no overlap at all. So I don't think I've got a great handle on your genre. I was thinking because your genre is also smaller than mine. So I think it's more niche, and it's not a genre that I read in. Whereas I think cozy mysteries also, I think because cozy mysteries are so A, popular, but B, we see them on TV a lot. They're very it's very easy to understand the concept.
I think
I think they're talked about as an example a lot on podcasts. So I think it's easy for you to know crazy mysteries, but even then it's not necessarily a genre that you read. It's not a genre that you're well aware of, but that's fine. That doesn't really matter, because it means also that I have to articulate things to you that are central to the conversation. So I will say, okay, so Amazon says these are the subcategories of crazy mystery. They're not. These are the subcategories. Do you think I'm aligned with this enough or not? And where do you think I'm going wrong with this? So I think it actually helps to have someone in your genre.
Because we don't have a biased opinion on something. Like, I'm not like comparing you to somebody else in your genre, like knowing like the full details of how they write and like what their brand is. I can just look at you completely separately and compare on a very like non-involved basis, and I do think that helps. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
in no way like having a biased opinion about anything that you're doing. It's just a very
From the
cold,
distance is
like,
helpful.
I don't think it lines up with that.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I think actually when we were
Yeah.
doing the
Oh, I
actual
don't think it's a bad
session where
thing.
we
Yeah.
spent, maybe we spent like 2-3 hours on the X meets Y for my book. And because
Oh,
you don't know my
well,
genre
yeah.
intimately, you really have to think about
Mhm.
what is the X meets Y that works for this, and like why does it work and why does it not work? And you were able to have enough distance to kind of have that conversation with me and ask enough questions. Whereas I think someone who's very in the genre, you're just often so stuck in like your preconceptions about a genre that you think you're
Mhm.
you're so close, you're looking at maybe only a handful of the options. And someone who's from a different
Yeah.
genre, they're looking at all the options possible, and they're really able to bring some fresh thoughts to it. um
Yeah.
and it felt like we spent forever on the X meets Y, and it's such a tiny thing, but actually it again, it brought up so many wider issues about like comp authors, about the genre convention, so for both of us, and about like how you're defining your books, how do you explain to people, are you doing that actually in your book? I think having kind
Mhm.
of even a very small question every single time we meet, it turns into a 5-hour conversation.
Yeah, it does, because you could, if we were just doing that on like on a call or in like texting each other, the conversation would be cut short because you'd think, I can't spend more time on this. I've got to move on. I've got
Hmm.
to go out. There's always something else to do. But when we're just sat there and that's all we're gonna do, we will do it until we are exhausted. We'll
Hmm.
talk about something until we literally exhaust the conversation, and
Mm.
that's a really like that's just something you'd never do on your own.
It feels like we're like
Is that
at
you really
university studying
drill
for
down.
finals. It's got that vibe.
Yeah, yeah, it does, and I love that because I
Yeah.
love being that like that obsessive, like, just got to learn this, got to figure this out. I really
Hmm.
like that feeling of being
Yeah.
in those trenches, of feeling like you're just so close to understanding something. And we
Hmm.
do often have these
Mm.
epiphanies. Like, that's always our joke. We've got the necklaces that say it, and we say it in the podcast all the time. Like, we have so many epiphanies, and a lot of
Hmm.
those are born from just like hashing something out for
Mm.
hours
To the end. Yeah.
to the
Yes.
bitter
So
end.
hopefully this has encouraged everyone to think about a mastermind, to think of someone to approach. And I would say it's worth, dipping your toe in it. If it doesn't work with one person, take your toe out again, dip your toe in somewhere else. Be a bit, put yourself out there, get around, get about, with your
Hmm.
mastermind options, and get to know some more
Yeah.
people and see who would fit for you. And I think we do it as a partnership. It doesn't have to be a partnership. It could be a small group. I think that might work well if
Hmm.
you weren't sure that you were ready to dive into a really close pairing for a while. You thought, I want to maybe find some people who are at least genre adjacent, and we just have a chat about a specific topic for a bit, so get some practice on it. But I think it is the most significant thing that I have done for my self-publishing in a long, long time, and it is not actually about publishing. So
Yes.
strong
Yeah.
recommendation for it. And also make a podcast. It's great. Feel free to contact us on Appheads Paycheck Authors on Instagram. We are very active there, and
Hmm.
yeah, we'll happily chat at no end about it. You could even be a guest on our podcast at some point
Yeah.
and talk about it. So to save you from a 5-hour conversation today, though, I think we should wrap up there where we are.
I
This is
think
obviously,
so.
though, a topic that we love talking about because the mastermind is fantastic. Any last things to say about it before we wrap up?
No, only that we thought that this was going to be a quick one.
Hmm.
It wasn't.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oopsie.
Correct as always. Hmm. But yeah, it was not. But I think it was really useful to think about, and it's also helpful for us to think about and really drill down in what works for us and what we want to do more of, which is everything.
Hmm.
So for
Yes.
next week's topic, we are continuing this topic, the series on the other people in your business. We're doing an episode on finding the other professionals you need. Do you have any initial thoughts on that?
Yes, I think that it's difficult to find professionals that you can rely on.
Hmm.
And once you do find them, you hold on to them as tightly as possible, and you work on those
Hmm.
relationships, and you make them a part of your team in whatever way that you can.
Hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure I feel like it's going to be a really short conversation next week. It won't be, but it feels like a short one because my only thing to say about this is, and it's advice you see all the time online that feels very frustrating, and it is get recommendations. And I've seen that a lot recently about like, how do I get a PA or a VA? Get recommendations. But that feels like, what if I don't know anyone's got a VA? How do I start from that? So I think we'll dive into that and figure out like the best way is to get recommendations. That's how I got both my cover designers and my editor were just personal recommendations from I trust a lot. In fact, all from the same person. Maybe.
I can't wait to talk about this because that's the opposite of me completely.
Oh my goodness. I don't know how I would.
I'm a
Yeah,
maverick.
I don't know how I would have done otherwise. Okay, yeah. Let's say the maverick route as well. But yeah, so I think it's really useful. And I think people don't talk about it enough. So yeah, cover designers, editors, VAs, audiobook narrators, translators. There's tons of people that you will need in your business in future. How do you find them? How do you get a good relationship with them? We will chat about that next week.
Yeah.
For now, though, it has been fantastic to have a chat. As always, with our mastermind, thank you for joining us. Do look us up online. We are on all the socials. We're at Pen to Paycheck Authors. We are, on all your podcast platforms. Recommend us to friends, like, subscribe, review, do all the things, and join a mastermind group and start your own podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to Pen to Paycheck Authors.
Stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to subscribe to learn how to write your way to financial success.